All right, man. What's up, fam? Hey, man. Welcome to another episode of Couples Connect. We are excited today about this interview about our guest. And man, my name is Kevin Locks, and this is my beautiful wife,
Tanya Locks.
Yeah. So we here, man. We're gonna talk about everything dealing with marriage, money, finances. You never know what you're gonna get in Couples Connect. Sex, all that stuff, right? So stay tuned, man. We're about to go into some stuff that hopefully is inspiring to you, that you enjoy it, and that you can apply in your marriage in some form, some way. So we got an amazing couple here today to kind of share with us and talk a little bit about just marriage stuff. So guys, please welcome our friends, man, and neighbors, Ty and Damian Thretts to the podcast. Welcome to Couples Connect, guys.
Glad to have us.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. So today, man, we're gonna get into some stuff, man. We just want to talk about marriage, right? You know, and I think the reason for this podcast is simply because, you know, Ty and I have been trying to do a podcast for some time, and the reason for the podcast is we felt that a lot of couples probably suffer in silence, right? There's a lot of things that couples go through, and we don't really necessarily know, you know, because we shame, we don't want to talk, nobody want to tell our business, right? But we just want to kind of open up a space where people can kind of talk and just kind of feel free to kind of say, hey, this is what we're going through, this is what we went through, but this is how we overcame it, or this is what we're still going through, and this is what we're doing to kind of maintain and try to work our way through it, right? So just an open, transparent space for marriage to talk. So let's get to know you guys a little bit, man. Tell us how you guys met, you know, how it all started. Usually the man, the husband and the wife, they both got two different stories.
So as we do.
We do, right? So how did you guys meet? How you guys had our started?
Well, I'm gonna let her start because I know she's gonna leave a lot of things out. So
See?
I'm just let her catch it. I'm gonna pick it up.
Okay.
So, yes, and I usually let him go first because I always have dates from people, all those things. So I'll let him tell you how many years we've been married. But we actually met online.
Really?
Yes, and it took us a while I think our family and friends always knew that, at least on my end. I was very careful not to say it so loud all the time because I had little ones, which I'll talk about that too. But now that they're older, it's like, you can say it. But when they're younger, I just didn't want to persuade that don't get to go looking online and be too young, right? But we did. We actually met online, which is very ironic because I moved to Texas, just throwing a dart, had never been here a day in my life from Chicago. And I brought my two children, and I was living in San Antonio at the time.
And I was in Houston at the time.
He was in Houston. Okay. And so, at that point in time, who and what were my options around me when I decided, like, God, if I was going to see someone, the options wasn't there. So that's what led me to going online. And so I ended up meeting him, and our first date was ironic. So we were messaging back and forth, like emailing. He told me one day it'd be better if we called or text each other. And I'm like, okay. So he gives me his number.
That was a smooth move.
He was. So he gives me his number, and I remember calling him super nervous, like, oh my God, what is it going to sound like? So anyway, there was two numbers, which we still have a problem with two numbers today. We both have two phones, like one for work, one our personal. Well, I didn't realize I was calling his work phone. And one day I'm at work because I would work in the evening. So I would call him as he's getting off. And I'm talking. And he's like, why do you keep calling my work phone? And I'm like, this is not your work phone.
And that's still a question we have.
And I just swore I was right. But imagine me thinking I'm right, but it's his work phone, right? And he's like, no, check the number, I gave you. And I'm like, I know I'm right, whatever reason. And he's like, listen, he goes, if I'm right, he was like, then he goes, you owe me you pack them kids up and you owe me a trip, down the road to Houston. He's like, yeah, if I'm wrong, if you're right, then I'll pack up and I'll come there and we'll have our first official date.
Okay.
So I hang up the phone as if I'm going to be right. And lo and behold, he was right. I was calling his work phone. So he said to me in that moment, he's like, he said, I am a gentleman. And he said, and so I do feel like that he should be the one that's more accommodating. He was like, so I'm gonna come down there, and he invited himself to my company's Christmas party, right?
Wow.
So first time meeting in person.
Wow.
So here I am telling my coworkers, like, you know that guy I told you about that I'm always talking to, like he's coming, like I need you all to be like with me, like all this stuff, and so. They're just laughing. So he's prepared to come. I didn't want to tell him where I live, so I told him about a hotel in the area that he could go to, right? I'm telling my mom and stuff back home because I was the only one in Texas. My family was like over 1,200 miles away, right? And so he ends up coming. He follows me, like I have him trail me to the daycare because I was going to drop the kids off at the daycare. And I go inside, I'm like, y'all got that license plate? They check every box. And so he does, I go, I leave my car parked there, get in the car with him, and we go off on our first date at the company Christmas party.
Wow.
And so it was a great night. And it never ended from that point. So it's like every other weekend, like one weekend he would come, the next weekend and the kids would go visit him. But that was after after New Year's Eve. So we met in December. And
December 3rd, exactly.
thank you.
Okay.
And so it just kind of went on from there, which I always say that I will say what I appreciate about Damien is the moment that he knew what package I came with. So I had 2 children, and they were 8 and 20 months. Well, we can say 12 months at the time. I do have that
Still
part.
like
He was a baby. And so I always say that I do appreciate that he understood the package that I came with. That was not a problem to him at all. He knew what he was looking for, which is so funny. And what I was looking for in life after going through what I had been through, I had been married, divorced, just, a lot of things. And I was like, you know what? I am willing to date, but I'm just looking for someone that is willing to be faithful, only date me, and accept my package. Like, that's all I wanted at that time. I wasn't thinking marriage per se. And he was very clear at 30 years old that he's like, look, I finished school, I have a great career, I got great friends, I'm looking for a wife. And he's like, I'm looking for a wife and I want a family. And
So let's catch up, but let me tap in. So how did you feel, Damien, with the 2 kids? Like, was that an issue with you, or what was your take on it?
So, before we start, and kind of let me preface this, so I have a twin brother.
Okay.
And my twin was staying with me at the time, temporarily before he left out of the country to go back to work. And so I'm talking, I said, man, this girl's kind of fine. I don't know if I should reach out. Well, he's like, man, take a chance. Like, what would you lose? And so, what you forgot to mention is, even in that time, we would still stay up 2, 3, 4, 5 hours on the phone, literally just talking and getting to know one another. And so I said, okay. He kind of pushed me. Sometimes I kind of stay in my comfort zone and I don't want to necessarily do something different. And so he kind of convinced me to take that chance. And so when she said come, she was very particular that not to see the kids and not to talk to the kids. So it was supposed to be just her and I. So yes, I had to I got a hotel room out of respect. When I followed her to the daycare, I didn't approach the kids. I stayed in the car the whole time, then followed her back. And then I went to my hotel that night and we still talked on the phone afterwards. And I went back to Houston after that. And it was a couple more weeks before I came back and actually met the children. So yeah, I kind of understood the situation. I was just kind of saying, hey, if it works, it works. I wasn't opposed to fatherhood. Now I'm older and I learned a lot more about my own family after getting married than I knew before being married. So we all have blended families in some which way, form, or fashion. So I asked when I did propose, and kind of presented it to the kids. Our daughter was on board since day one. She was just like, you're going to be my dad.
She did.
How long were you guys dating though before you asked her in marriage?
So we first talked December 3rd. I proposed October 3rd.
Okay.
He's very intentional. So I was at school during that time, right? So we had went to a friend's wedding and he started talking about it. Actually, him, his family, like he would have to tell them, be quiet, don't say the N word. Because they were like, oh, you guys just act like you've been married forever. Like everybody always says it when you walk in. He's like, don't say the word, don't say the word, because she's gonna run. I mean, talking about how I ran all the time, but he said to me one day, I remember doing my homework, he said, if we got married, we have to have a big wedding because you have a large family. Where would all my grandson come from? And I'm like, we are not getting married. And he's like, and truly it was only because it was so good dating that having had that prior experience, I was just like, we don't need to add that to the mix if that's gonna make you act crazy or any other thing, right? And so that was kind of like my apprehensions about it, not to mention that I went through with my oldest one and I just really, like I say, was like cautious about the kids. And like I say, I always appreciate the moment he decided to walk into our lives, he never walked out. And so that's not a story that they have. And the youngest one doesn't even know what it's like to not have two parents. And so, but when he decided and he started talking dates, he was thinking October 2nd when his twin would come back. And so he tried to propose an exact year to give us time to kind of move. And I messed it up because I don't like surprises. And I have a very short, so anyway, so it ended up being
I messed it up 3 times.
But
3 times.
that's news to me. I thought it was fun. So he was trying to do it exactly a year from, like, give us a year. Because he's just very big on, like, dates and things like that. So when he did ask, it ended up being the 3rd, but that would be my fault. So, you know. Anyway.
How long was it your fault?
Because I ruined the one on October 2nd. What?
She couldn't catch no hint, no nothing.
No.
Everybody knew what was going on with her, and she just kept asking questions and everything. And I'm like, oh, like, she just it was so planned, and then it fell through that literally that night. I said, look, you got down on one knee and like, will you marry me?
Nicer than that, but
It was a little nicer, but it got to the point where it's frustration, or like,
Yeah.
you ruined everything.
Wow.
yeah.
So how long now has it been though, since y'all been married? How many years?
This year would be 14.
14 years.
14.
15 together, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've been forcing marriage.
Yep. That
I think
2008.
what I learned about his family after the fact, because imagine being a young woman with 2 children and you have to come and meet his parents. Because he invited us on a Easter weekend in Port Arthur, Texas. I'm just laughing because if you ever been there, I hope they're never watching.
Correct.
So,
Correct. Port Arthur.
so we went, as a family, and I'm nervous because I'm like, I'm walking in with, a whole package. His parents have been married 50-something years now.
54.
54. And I'm just like, that was on my mind. And his parents, as soon as we walked in the door, just embraced us, grabbed those kids. And, it was never a mention of that. And Damien shared with me later on that when he talks about blended families, when his mom and dad got together, she had had 2 children also.
Oh.
And then they married and they had twins. And so to me, just to kind of understand some of our like similarities in our stories, and I'm like, one is great. She could have still chose to judge me, both of them could, but they're just such loving, parents, and I've had them lost before. But just saying they are. And to learn, that he didn't even, I don't think that you even fully knew that story, that just ended up happening.
Like I said, I learned more about my parents and their marriage after becoming married than I did growing up in what I watched. And it's only because, we grew up. I grew up in the 90s, but she don't say she ain't the 90s, baby. So my dad worked 3rd shift, so I didn't really see him until the weekends, and so everything with my mom. So just kind of that ebbs and flows of how you got to make a marriage work. We didn't know. And the fun part about it is they started telling her.
No, I just listen more.
They started telling her. And I'm like, I never knew.
No.
X, Y, and Z. And then it was like, oh, by the way, type conversation.
No, I just listen. I don't know where he'd be. Like, he still don't even believe his parents made him. Like,
Question, so you said you started finding out things about your parents after you got married. So
Mhm.
did you know or not know that she had 2 kids? Were you one of those 2 kids?
No, my 2 older brothers.
Yeah, you didn't know
My
that.
mom had them before meeting my dad. No, I didn't.
You didn't know that.
Mm-mm. We were just
So,
well, I was going to say that his dad, which is funny, and I don't know if this came out after you mentioned that you wanted to adopt the kids or not, that they shared that the older 2 boys, so he has a brother 10, 15 years older than him, that his dad legally adopted him. And it might have been when Daniel was
Yeah.
talking about doing the same thing that they kind of shared. Like Damien is like just trotting their entire path of story. The only difference is we ain't spit out no twins. You don't have 4 kids, we have 2. But I think that was the only difference. And I think that might have been when it was shared. I do not think it was a secret. I do believe even watching our youngest kid, that some children just pay attention to different things. I don't know if you've ever asked your twin brother if he knew, but I just truly think that sometimes parents don't say things, right away. They wait until their children cross into that, phase. And then I do think sometimes, like, it just depends on what the child is paying attention to, because his brothers absolutely have all the stories and know when, where, and how all of that, happened and transpired. But it was just, to me, I always say God took a person who came from a history of broken marriages. That's me. No example, no marriages that have lasted or even happened. And connecting me with the person where that's all their family knows on that side is marriages. No matter how they get through it, like when we learn the worst parts later on. But he connected me with a family that comes from an entire line of just marriages, And so I just thought that when I step back and I just look at how God can take 2 people, he's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I'm from Chicago, but yet we meet in Texas, right? And it's like online, and how all these things just like cross, and then your mom and your parents' story is our story, but you didn't even know that story. So I will say that on days when we want to toss the marriage out, because we go there, right? Like, it's like, I have to remember those things, because I'm the runner. I'm the runner. But I do remember those things, right? Of just how God's divine connection. And yes, when we were dating, I would break up with Damien every other weekend. So what happened is, like, when it was my turn to drive home, like, if I went to Houston, we'd have such a great weekend. He would always plan something for us to do as a family, whatever. And as I'm driving back in the silence, and I'm like, this is too good to be true. Just jump before it's just too. And I'm like, I would think about these things that I was letting him know. I'm like, I think this is gonna work out, right? So I would just pretty much break up with him, and he would call me. He'd be like, "Okay, if that's how you feel," and then I'm like, "Okay, so you understand?" He's like, "Yeah." We get off the phone, and then later on that night, when he normally would call me, he would just call me back, and I'm like, "Why is he still talking to me?" And then he would show up this weekend, and I'm just like, "That's fine," but it will always happen that same way. But it was just because for me, as I would start sitting there thinking, I'm like, this is just abort the mission beforehand. So that was why we would break up all the time. And I don't ask me why now. Sometimes I tell them, like, I'm gonna break up with them. I just think at this point it's like, that's just the spice, I'm gonna break up with them.
I think it just makes her feel better. I think it just makes her feel better.
So that's interesting.
She's
So,
like, you didn't know we broke up?
Yeah.
no. Like, she broke up with you, but you never broke up with her. We still together. So, quick question. I want to kind of go back into something that was very interesting, right? Because there's this whole thing about when a single mom already got kids, right? Trying to find someone who can accept not just her, but her kids as well. How did that play with you? Trying to, finding Damien, right? But even before that, what was the mindset? Like, did you feel like the hope was kind of, your hope was down a little bit, like trying to find someone who's going to accept you and your kids?
Hearing from a male's perspective, that because everything else that was fed to me from women and boys, I would say that was just kind of like, yeah, nobody's going to want to be with somebody that, has children.
Wow. So I heard you also mention that you wanted to adopt your kids as like How was that, man? What made you get to that point? Because that's huge. First, I want to just commend you on that because that's amazing. Not just because marrying her and just being that stepdad is one thing, but just saying, hey, I want those kids, you know what I'm saying, to be mine. And did y'all change the last name and how did it all work? What made you do that?
So the names were changed before we even had the
youngest one was.
the youngest one,
Yeah.
but we really talked about adopting. And so I've never seen myself as a stepdad. I'm dad.
I like
Your
it.
parents raised you.
It was never anything other than that. They never referred to me as stepdad or anything. It was always dad. Even the youngest one, he always said dad or daddy or something. So I never saw myself as anything other than that. And I think it was just like, you know, we're a family. I think the best thing for me was at least carry my name. Since I wanted to kind of pass on the lineage and my name, that was the most important thing. And at the time, it really wasn't kind of the adoption thing. I was just like, hey, as long as they have my last name, that's fine. And the oldest presented a card on Father's Day. And I think that's where it really started. And in this card, she wrote a note. She says, I want you to be my dad, my legal dad. And that's kind of where
I think
the wheels start. No, I don't need a tissue. You see. And I'm going to tell you the one thing, like Father's Day is really, really important to me because of that reason. So if there's one holiday a year that I really, really take seriously, even more than my birthday, it's Father's Day. Because on both times, that's when the kids said, we want you to be our legal parent on separate occasions, but it was still on Father's Day.
Wow.
So I've legally adopted our oldest. We've done a name change on both of them. Our youngest will be 18 next year, and then that's a conversation. We've already started talking about it. But then he can be legally adopted at this point. So, and we waited until 18 because for him, for our son to go through and change his name, there's so many legal hoops.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like it was so much when it was so obvious who the caretaker was. Like I've been taking care of him since he's been a year and a half. But in the state of Texas, the court system wasn't as lenient. So we were going back and forth. So once we got through the first process with the oldest, I said, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to wait until he's 18, because when he's 18, he can sign off in the process is a lot easier. But that was a painstaking process.
Yeah, I'll add that our youngest one always calls himself Parker Beats. My last name is Thretts. He can't even say Thretts yet, but he just knew that that was his name. He's in private school, so the school always understood the situation and let him be called by that name. And so, so he never used his former last name. It legally was on documents, but like he just didn't. And so, when we got ready to, when he was in, I think second grade or something like that. So I think it was second grade, and the teacher, the nurse or something, told him, "That's not your last name. Like, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "She said that's not my last name." And so we explained to him, and so Damien's like, "We gotta get to the paperwork." But the issue is that you have to get the parent to sign off on it, whether they're on the birth certificate or not. And so it was a very costly and just a long process. But he was the first one that legally had the name change. Now my daughter, being from my first marriage, my son was not. But my daughter being from the first marriage, she knew who her dad was. The relationship and everything was like there. She was kind of struggling with the lack thereof, but she always was like on her terms she wanted to. And we all made her feel that it was okay. Like you do not have to feel the need to match her brother's name and our name. Like, you know, you're still loved. Like, and so she just kind of went through her own journey with that. And I didn't know that she was waiting until she was 18 years old to make the choice, because she didn't want her dad to make that choice for her. She wanted to be clear that it was hers. And so she too waited until that time. And I think our son, once he kind of understood, and we always tell the kids, I always feel like when a kid can form a question, we'll get the answer. That's my point. Like, okay, we here, like we're gonna get the answer. And sometimes I'll tailor it to like their understanding at that time. But our son was like 7 when we first kind of had that conversation. And then, you know, my daughter was always old enough to know, which if you were talking to her, she would let you know she prayed her brother into our lives and him. She's like, how do we get a dad? And I'm like, baby, I don't know, that's up to God. So that's her praying. And he comes in and she was like, oh, that's him, right? And it's funny because she does not, you would think she says that about anyone. No, she's very skeptical. But the moment she met him, she's like, oh yeah, that's my dad. She tied him up and everything. And I'm like, oh my, like, I'm just embarrassed. But
At 8 years old.
at 8 years old, she was like, she just knew, you know. And
She said she tied me up so I couldn't.
I have no clue, but yeah,
That's
so,
awesome.
but it did. And so we just kind of, I was worn out from the process of just the whole legal name change and everything we had to go through. And they were like, you guys are almost there, you know, just this. And we just took a break. We just like, we just don't even feel like going through this. And my daughter recently said something, just being mean. She's like, so technically I'm my dad's only child. my son is like, what, dad? Like, get her. And so he's like, kinda, you know, so he did tell him, he's like, you know, we just kind of paused and this is why. So when you're 18, if you kind of, you know, want to do it yourself, you know, that's just why we did it. It's, you know, his name is his name, his identity. You know, I always say the kids act more like him sometimes than they do me. Like, you know, which is very funny to see the type of impression you can make on a child that doesn't even carry your DNA. You know, so we just had that conversation because my daughter likes to say technically she's his only child.
Wow.
Man, that's the thing in the house right now.
Since they were
That's my dad's only child.
it's so messy.
And my son doesn't look like. Whatever.
Like, I ain't worried about you.
Well, I'm glad that your Father's Day is special like that, man. That's an amazing, amazing thing to have. Not just you accept them, but them accept you, right?
Mhm.
So that's pretty dope. I only get some draws on Father's Day, so you're.
Now, wait a minute. Now, it's a special day. I didn't say it comes from the whole different gifts and everything. It is a special day for me, just because I know the journey that I've had. You know, one of my older brothers, him and his wife, they adopted one of their nieces. My dad adopted 2 boys. I got a couple of buddies from college. They've adopted children, and one buddy, all their children up until 2 or 3 years ago had all been products of the foster care system. So not only, you know, by blood do we celebrate it, but I got a great group of friends who too have stepped up and they do their Father's Day thing. And so much that they have an annual Father's Day fishing trip out into the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow.
So I have a group of friends who are tremendous because the one thing that they don't take seriously is the role of a father.
I love it.
Wow.
I love it.
I was gonna say, because you have most, unless just keep it real, most Black men run from their own children.
Yeah.
So for you to want to take that role and become their father, and like, yeah, I'm your father, that is huge. Now, have you guys decided to have? You only have 2, right? So did you not want any kids together? I'm not saying that you don't have.
Okay, so I thought you were gonna say, do you want me now?
No.
The ship has sailed.
He's gonna say we practiced a whole lot.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I found out, I always had very difficult pregnancies. And so in between my 2, I actually miscarried twins. And so I always knew it was very difficult, and it was really important to Damien in the beginning that he's like, I want to know that you can have children in the event that, you know, we wanted to. And so, you know, the answer was like, yes, you could, but it might be difficult, you know, whatever. We didn't know how. how difficult it would be. And I think I was like right about 28, 29 when I was just like, ooh, and he's like, look, this your window. He's like, he's older than I am. So he's like, listen, this your window. And the doctor actually told me at that time I was having different types of complications. And they're like, look, this would be the risk if you chose to and the things that we have to do. But also, please understand that it can come down to the point that if you make it full term, that it's your life of that child's. And Damien was like, that's a no-brainer. He's like, I'm happy if I never have any more children. Those two upstairs, well, they were upstairs at the time, are, enough for me. He's like, I'm not willing to risk losing you in order to, just for the sake of saying like, oh, that's my DNA, So that was still very more difficult for me, I would say, because it took even years after me not being able to have any to just kind of accept that. But I also wanted to share too that Damien, now I didn't come with any drama. I didn't have a big daddy drama, but yet they still existed, two of them. One of them we just didn't know where they were, and the other one. And Damien had a conversation, man to man. He's very man to man, when it comes to this. I'm not going to tell you how to raise your children, but I'm going to give you the space to co-parent, and whether they accept it or not, which they, obviously didn't. But I always appreciated with Damien that from the very beginning, he's like, I'm the man and my ego is not too big in sharing these children. Like he was always about what do the kids need and their love and his conversations with them about their consistency or lack thereof. Like you can't just keep parading back in here when you feel like it. This is our daughter, or he's doing this. And I always appreciated how he was always willing to pull them aside and have that conversation. And I knew about it after the fact. But, to me, to just really see when you think about it, how he just always, he loves those kids. And it's always what is best for them. At that moment, everything he does, every move he makes is always about those kids. I always say, so I'm second. You don't care about the kids first. You don't care about the kids first. And he's like, you go sit down somewhere, but I'm even work about those kids.
Even before proposing, I reached out to both fathers and had a conversation. Said, I'm planning to propose and I'll be a parent in for kids' life. Are we going to co-parent? So the conversation basically was, are we going to co-parent or do you want to sign over your legal rights?
Wow.
At that time, back then, both gentlemen said that they were going to co-parent. One had never materialized after that phone call. The other, it materialized for a couple years and then it just kind of fell off. And that's kind of maybe how a little bit of resentment came in with the oldest child over those teenage years, because it was, you had two dads and you had a lot of things, and then one just fell off, and then you felt resentment of why was I not good enough for him.
Right.
And that was a difficult period to deal with too, because I'm just trying to love on you, I'm trying to raise you. But you have anger and frustration that I can't break through or I can't deal with because it's not for me, it's for somebody else.
Damien, dude, that is pretty dope, man. I mean, the process that you went through and everything that you did to respect her, respect the baby's dads, you know what I'm saying? And man, and then just to kind of really want to take on the kids and let them carry the last name. Kudos to you, man. That's pretty big. That's something you don't really hear often, especially from a black man.
Going through the same thing, trying to decide if I want to take on his kids, or what should I do? And I just feel like a lot of times we all go through things to help push someone else, a couple, and to also help give them permission in a way to say it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay if you make that decision to do that. So this is so good.
I'll tell you a funny story. It's a funny statement that I make, but there's truth in it. I told Damien maybe two years since our marriage. So I don't understand why couples stay married until their kids graduate. I said, because I walked in this marriage with 2 kids and I wouldn't walk out with 2. Because one of them wouldn't even pick me. Like, I'm just not even on the list, you know. The other one, my daughter would pick me. That's my ride or die. She would talk about me. She would probably resent me, and she's still going to have that relationship. Because she lets me know, I don't care what happened. That's my dad. Like, you know, the youngest one, I'm like, I'm not living without my baby. I said, I understand how people stay because it was very clear. Like, if we were like a few years into being a family, I'm like, these kids, they some traitors. Like, I carried you. To find a stretch mark on my body and your name on it. Carried you. And then like, dang, like, you know, I already know my son worships the ground he walks on. Anything that's like, do not even think about saying it. Today, we said we're going to talk about our marriage. He said, oh boy. Like, don't come back talking about you not my dad. It's just like, we know what choice he's going to make, but they are definitely like his kids. And I'm just like, so I had to see
In
that.
1 year, hey, they're independent.
Wait,
They're independent.
already independent.
Well, when she will be even more independent.
Yeah.
So for us, we got like, we're looking like, we got a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, let's say this, man. Just to transition a little bit, because Ty, you mentioned something that I found was very interesting, and that was you said that you were the one that always was. You would break up with him like multiple times, and you would just be like, oh, okay, that's fine. So, is there an underlining of why you would do that? Is there something connected to the fact that you constantly breaking up, and has that also carried over even into the marriage? So like,
Yeah, I can own that. Like, you know, so you know how they talk about fire and fight? I'm usually a fighter. Boy, I fight when it comes because, and I will say God has worked on me in this area sometimes that when the going gets tough, and it's always communication, and he can be very unmovable sometimes, and this be me, like, once I preach a sermon and I know I let God speak with me and the offering plate didn't get passed and you get paid and you didn't move, I'm just done, like at that point. And mostly because sometimes I do feel like, and God has had to check me on this, that with my marriage, like with the children, I don't get a choice. I'm their mom. Like, you know, that's my responsibility with my family. No matter what happens, it's going to still be my family. But with him, I'm like, I don't know, maybe not. Like, we could just, you know, read this paper up and we done, right? And, you know, and so sometimes I'm like, do I want to keep, you know, fighting through that communication barrier? Or do I just want to leave, right? You know, and so sometimes I'm like, out of frustration and just not knowing what else to do, I'll be like, I'm just done. Like, you know, I'll tell him that. And sometimes he responds to it. I do not do it to get a response from him, right? Like, you know, at all. I really feel like you should consciously just, you know, communicate better. But, you know, it's like, but I'm the one that I'm just like, I'll just leave because do I have to be doing this? So sometimes I have looked at my marriage a lot of times of like, you know, do I have to keep fighting through that? Or can you just be like, well, you know, we just don't call it quits. Maybe I won't be fighting, right? So I have thought that a lot of times. I cannot say we displayed that to the kids, but I can say in the back of my mind, sometimes I'm like, how would I explain this to the kids? I would have to walk away without the kids. And what would that make me look like? A person that gave up, right? So now I'm insane because I'm just like, okay, great, now you got to work this out. But I always go back to one, how we met and just all of those things that it's like, yes, like, that is just so weird that all of those things came together. We actually never in our life had a fight. We were that dumb couple in marriage counseling when they were talking about fights. I'm like, we've never fought. Like, if we just didn't want that, we would have. We were so naive, right? But God was like, if you would have knew that you was going to have struggles like that going into them, would you have chosen it? No, I would have not. I would not have chosen it. And so I've had to be checked and worked on that part, you know, a lot. But you know, I just, that's always a me thing. I will say that, I always say that the reason why we are still married is because Damien stayed out. Just be standing there like, I ain't about to let you leave. Like, it's like, I don't know what to do, but I'm just standing here and I'm like, great,
I
like,
keep saying, you stuck. Until one of us pass away, you stuck.
so most
Whatever it is you got going through, hey, that's it. Look, you stuck. We stuck together.
Wow. So most of the things, the trials and things that you guys have dealt with in the last 14, 16 years, 14 married, right?
Mhm.
Has it been mainly communication between you two?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Is it, so we've heard a lot of great things about you, a lot of great things that you have done. So is communication, you're not showing, is it like why? Do you know, do you know that? Are you aware?
Wasn't aware. Wasn't aware. A lot of it tied back to some undealt trauma, right? I can be stubborn. I can be a flat a-hole. And, you know,
I didn't mean to knock so hard.
I don't need to shake it. And so it's kind of more so not talking about how I felt and how things were affecting in expressing what I need here, because she will always say what she need, and you know, you're just like, I'm cool, I'm good, I'm fine. I was work, it was good, that's it. But it wasn't expressing or saying, you know, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that, or this is weighing on me. So I say for about 13 of those 14 years, that's what it was not talking, right? Wow.
Can we be honest, 13 and a half?
Oh, I'm saying.
And
And then, you know, this last year has really been an extreme challenge on us. But also at the same time, I don't think we've ever been closer than back in the dating world. And a lot of it just is really communication. Like, it's really just like, and I've come, and I'm just like, ooh, I'm just having a moment right now. I just give me a space, or I need a hug or something. It's just communicate. You know, everybody has moments. They have emotions. They have feelings. You know, most of the time, men, we want to be this hard type figure and everything else. But in my house, I probably cry more than anybody in the house.
he's the most.
And at this point, I'm just accepting.
But that's a
At this
difference,
point,
right?
it's just accepting. I might well tear up in a second, and I have no problem with it. I don't care where we at. That's it.
That's the sentimental part of it, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
But there's also it's an outward release at the same time,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, if it's frustration or if it's just joy or something, it's just an outward thing. I think when our daughter graduated, I'm the only one in there. Everybody else looking at me like, "Are you for real?"
Right.
But in my mind, I'm thinking, you don't know. You don't know what that journey was for that young lady to walk across that stage. And then even with the younger, you don't know the journey you crossed with, you know, you had to go through to get this person to get to this stage. So let me have my moment. If y'all don't understand me, hey, don't worry about me. That's it.
So tell me this, so a communication piece with you. First of all, most men, right, not just you, have this communication. Seems like most men, a lot of men. I ain't gonna say most, but a lot of men for sure
A lot.
have this communication barrier, right?
Mhm.
We can't. It's hard for us to express ourselves. It's hard for us to communicate, right? Because we've had those issues in our relationship as well. But why do you think men? Why do you think it's so hard for men to communicate? Because women are always willing. I'm pretty sure my wife is always ready to talk about something. If we got something going on, she wanted to talk about it. So, and lots of times I just wasn't in that space, wasn't ready to talk about it. I just didn't want to deal with it. Whatever.
Correct.
Why do men, you think, you know, and you ladies can chime in on it as well, but why do you personally think that men have such a hard time for communication?
I think one of the points that you just said, didn't want to deal with.
Why?
I mean, we don't want to deal with it because we think that if we don't talk about it,
It's gonna go away.
and it's just going to go away, or we'll eventually come back to it. But that isn't the case. You know, not talking about it doesn't allow this problem to go away or anything. Now you've just created a bigger problem because now you've created more tension and more buildup because you won't talk about it. So I think and especially depending on the age you know, especially in the Black culture, you know, we don't. My dad isn't the same way, and even my older brothers, they just don't talk about certain things. Like we just don't, and we expect women to just deal with it and be okay with it, and it's actually not okay. I mean, it does the opposite thing. So it's a lot about that pro-masculine type aura or stigma that is out there in the world. And, you know, we will be less macho if we talk about our feelings. We will be less of a man if we cry. If we would be less of a man if we admit that we have fears and things. So I think that's what it ultimately.
Do you think that's something embedded in us when we were younger, like maybe from mom or dad?
Yeah, I mean that's what we see.
Yeah,
it's what you see as kids, and I think it's a little different with this generation because this generation has more access to a lot of things. So they're going to see some stuff, and you're going to be put in a situation where you're going to have to talk about it or not because there's just more abundance of information, right? There's Google, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, where you can basically find information. But when I was their age, we had an encyclopedia in the phone book. There wasn't much out there to look for. So I think a lot of that has to kind of deal with it. We've seen our parents and they come up through the civil rights era and things like that, and they had to take so much and they just had to bear it, and they just couldn't openly express frustration and pain and hurt, and they just bottled it in. And as the kids were growing up, that's exactly what we saw, and that's what we learned, that you bottle it up and you just deal with it.
yeah.
I was gonna say, I think it's like a few fold in there that we were raised by different generations. And so he was raised by the silent generation, and you just watch and take away what you do. And raising children, I also realized that some kids can be in the same household and extract completely different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some don't even go back and ask. And as I would open the floor for the kids to have conversations and make room, like this is your trusted environment in the house. Sometimes, depending on what we were going through or what was coming out, he sometimes would have those tearful moments of like, that's what I needed when I was that age. Like, you know, I didn't get a chance. It helps me have more patience and understanding him. We all come with our baggage. And so I'm one of those people to a fault. I'm very fair. Like we have a rule in the house and he's the only person that don't abide by, that you have 24 to 48 hours to get over it and come back, right? And yes, and the kids like, Mom, you gonna go talk to Dad because he over the limit, like, you know, and they know, but once he gets there, boy, he's there. Like, you know, he's like, I ain't coming back. And I literally I'm a communicator. I don't care, like, right is just having the conversation so we can understand, because I always tell them in our conversation, I'm like, we'll be here again. I'll see you next boxing round, because I know when we haven't dealt with it, right? And I start to see like the cycle of things that happen. I'll explain it to them, like, what's gonna happen is you're gonna shut down, I'm gonna say this, then I'm gonna get mad, you're gonna wanna walk away, and I'm gonna just be quiet. And so I got to the point where I learned, I'm like, it's okay to give you a couple moments to process it, right? My daughter's the same way. Like, both of them act exactly the same. They need moments to process it. My son and I are like, let's talk about it. Let's understand where we came from. Let's understand what the rules are. We good. Like, you know, that's it. And so he will let a couple days go by and I have to be silent. And if you know me, I just want to talk. I'm going to be over it. Like, you know what I'm saying? But I have to be silent and stand that ground. And he was asked stuff like, so do we have this in the refrigerator? And my mind is like, why don't you look? Stop trying to engage in a conversation without having the real conversation. And so I will say that if it's anything that's more stubborn with me, and like, I'm big on the whole communication and just mutual respect. I'm not trying to change what it is you think, and I'm trying to understand where we're going. Are we in this together or are we not? Like, what are we talking about? And so I was standing there and he'll come back finally, because I had to learn to be quiet. Like, it just, not give in, and then he's like, well, this is what I was thinking, this is how he, got there. And I'm like, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. I know that I tend to be a person that people think like I don't give in, but I'm like, I just don't give in to BS. But if you're being real, it will reach me. And it's when we have those conversations and come together that I'm like, okay, I can understand him more. His why, it helps me learn how to work with him better. But if you're not talking, I can't help.
But you know what? Ooh, we need to come back and revisit that so that we can give tools on how we do it. Because I dealt with the same thing with Kevin in so many departments. I shut him off, dealt with him with a long handed spoon.
Yeah.
I'm not letting you in that space because you don't know how to handle it.
And they didn't be knowing. Like they didn't even know you was blacked out. Like,
Right? You
didn't know.
Well, some things he knew, but some things he don't know.
Yeah.
Or knew that not blocked. And so that's really good. But I had to learn how to figure that out. And one of the things that I did was that I had to renew my heart.
Yes, it's like once we heal, see the thing is like we fight to make it through things, right? And it's, that's what we're doing to survive in this season, right? But once we've made it past that part and we've become whole in that area, I gotta go back and restore my heart and my trust and all those things. And so that's not even on him because I don't even know where men's buttons or whatever are, but my office would be like, just flip it off. If I don't wanna deal with it, flip it off. That's just what I do. And you be thinking I'm good. No, we're not. You don't even get a chance to be there. I'm over here just to be myself and I. That's all I got. We don't even know. We didn't broke up. No.
Hey man, listen, I'm telling you.
How many times have you broken up with me?
2 minutes ago. And let's not talk about the silent one that I didn't verbalize.
And he was still here.
Still here.
I just hear it. I was like, okay. All right. We broke up? We broke up? Okay.
Yeah.
Man, this is so good, man. I tell you this, we definitely have to do a part 2 to this because I think we were just getting into the field of things. This was starting to get so good. But I want to commend you guys, man, for just kind of sharing and being transparent because I think there's some correlation between some of the stuff that she and I dealt with in terms of communication. Maybe she shut down certain me out of certain parts of her life, and that goes to show you, man, that there's so many couples that's kind of dealing with the same things. We all dealing with the same things, right? It's just that we're just not vulnerable. We don't create a safe space to where we can be able to talk to people and let them know that, hey, this is what we've been going through. This is how we dealt with it, or are we trying to deal with it, so we can help one another. And that's really what we're trying to create, right? So, any of that thing you want to say, man, about this communication, because that's big. Because this literally almost seems like I told you guys apart, but after 14 and a half years, 14 years. You seem like now you're in a space where I get it, and now you're kind of really doing that, some reflection.
It took us to the brink.
Yeah.
And it seems so simple, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that's so controlled.
Yeah.
It's just like.
You have to want to do the work, though.
That's the part.
Yeah.
But
that's the part. You get some people that after so many years, they don't want to do the work. They don't want to reinvest that time or that energy. They are more concerned with being complacent than working. And I believe, just even here being in this moment, is neither one of us in this room are accepting complacency.
No. We're not.
And so it's not. And we all have our challenges, and we need to have healthy spaces to express them. So I think that also helps as well. Everybody needs a safe space where they can communicate something.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, she's got friends, I got friends, everybody's got the hey, you need to call me. Call me, and whatever you say, just know it's safe. Right? Now, when I hang the phone up out of
You never talk about men gossiping on the other window. They do.
right? So a group chat, that could be another
A whole other thing, sure.
whole other thing.
Yeah. But anything you want to say, man, to kind of close out?
I just want to say, thank you guys for being an example for marriages because you could have ended it sooner, or we could have ended it sooner, years ago. Just thank you for being an example for everybody. But marriage is, your spouse is your mirror, and sometimes when we are talking to our spouses and saying things and trying to get them to understand things, they see it differently. But your spouse is your mirror. So I'm talking to you and you're telling me all the things that I probably need to change about myself, but don't want to change, But it's true that I should change. You're my mirror.
Mhm.
You're my mirror. So it's good. But anyway, this was really good.
Really good. So thank you guys, man, for sharing and being a part of this because, again, we learned some stuff about you guys that we didn't know. And it's just kind of great just to kind of get to know you a little bit more, Damien, and how a standard guy you truly are, man. Regardless of the communication or the things that you deal with personally. But on the deeper core, you seem like you're just a stand-up guy, and I just love that about you because most men don't step in that space that you have stepped in and accept all those things, right? So I appreciate you guys, man, so much. Ty, you got a girl and everything that you guys are doing. I love to see that. It seems like what you were going through, it seems like you're starting to maybe turn a corner a little bit on some of that communication stuff. But what it came from was maybe some self-improvement stuff on your end. And then at the same time, you still have to do self-work, right, on yourself. Tanya and I are always, probably the last 3-4 years.
Yes, I've been on this journey for a long time.
She's been on it for a long time, but I think that's a missing space in many couples.
Yeah.
Right, that individual. I think when you kind of come together, you look at each other like, hey, we together, we fussing and this thing. But sometimes you can solve that problem if you just kind of look at the thing separately and say, instead of me looking at her and looking at her faults, I'm gonna start looking in the mirror, looking at me. Right, and when I start doing the work on me,
Correct.
automatically things begin to be better.
Yeah.
And when she do the same, you have to just enhance everything a whole lot more. So, we can definitely talk about this again, man. So thank you guys so much, man, for being a part of Talking Connect, part 2 coming up. So, hey, man, so check it out, man. We got an amazing series of talking to different couples about some amazing stuff. So check us out. Stay tuned, man. Like, share, Couples Connect, and everything that we got going on. We're going to have more amazing guests just like Damien and Ty representing right here on Couples Connect with Kevin and Tanya Locks. So stay tuned, stay locked in. This Couples Connect. We're going out and peace.